Imagine this. You're at your lowest, begging for a lifeline, and your family slams the door in your face. My name is Lila Chen, and when my world crumbled, jobless, broke, and broken, my parents didn't just abandon me. They told me I was a disgrace. But then, their perfect son fell, and suddenly, they needed the daughter they discarded. Stay with me, because this isn't just my story. It's a revolution for anyone who's ever been counted out. The rain was relentless that night, hammering against the cracked window of my tiny Oakland apartment. I'd just gotten back from the ER, my chest still tight from a panic attack that had felt like my heart was caving in. Earlier that day, my boss at the bookstore had called me into her office. "Lila," she said, her voice clipped, "you've missed too many shifts. We can't keep you." I'd been late because the panic attacks were getting worse, stealing my breath, my focus, my life. My savings were gone, drained by medical bills and rent. The eviction notice was taped to my door when I got home. I was 29, alone, and drowning. I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mother. My hands shook as I dialed, the phone cold against my ear. I didn't ask for much, just $800 to cover rent, just a month to get back on my feet. I poured out my story, the panic attacks, the job loss, the fear. My mother listened, her silence heavy, then sighed, a sound I knew too well. "Lila, you're 29. You've made your choices. We're done bailing you out." Her voice was sharp, like she was scolding a child. I heard the clink of her tea mug, the murmur of a cooking show on TV. Her life untouched while mine was unraveling. I asked for Dad. She passed the phone without a word. "We're not a charity, Lila," he said, his tone flat. "You've had your chances. Figure it out." No warmth, no questions, just judgment. Then I heard my grandmother's voice in the background, sharp and deliberate. "She's always, been a mess. She should have been more like Nathan." Nathan, my younger brother, their golden child, the one they'd always held above me. That comparison, a constant in my childhood, now felt like a blade. I didn't cry or argue. I said, "Okay," and hung up. I sat on the floor, the eviction notice crumpled in my hand. The anger wasn't loud. It was quiet, cold, a vow carved into the dark. You'll never get to reject me again. I packed a duffel bag, laptop, a few clothes, a notebook, and left. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in a place that felt like surrender. My best friend, Maya, let me crash on her couch. "You're not alone," she said, handing me a blanket. But I felt alone, and that feeling became my fuel. The next month was survival. I found a job bussing tables at a 24-hour diner, the kind of place where the coffee was bitter and the tips were worse. My hands smelled of grease, my back ached, but it was something. At night, when Maya's apartment was quiet, I opened my laptop and started teaching myself graphic design. I'd always loved art, sketches, paintings, anything that let me create. But my parents had called it a hobby, not a career. Now, with nothing left to lose, I watched free tutorials on YouTube, practiced on pirated software, and built mock-ups for imaginary clients. I didn't tell anyone, not even Maya. This was mine, a secret I nurtured in the dark. Growing up, I'd been the invisible daughter. Nathan, 3 years younger, was the star. He could do no wrong. His B in science was a crisis worthy of tutors, while my straight A's were barely acknowledged. "Don't overshadow your brother," Mom would say when I won art contests. "Let Nathan shine." I did, because I loved him. I helped him with homework, covered for him when he snuck out, even lent him money for his first car when he crashed Dad's. But love didn't make me equal. When I moved out at 22, working 2 jobs to pay for community college, they called me independent, like it was a compliment. Really, it was their way of saying, "You're on your own." When the panic attacks started in my mid-20s, I hid them. I didn't want to be the burden they already thought I was. But when I lost my job, when the world felt like it was closing in, I thought, maybe now they'll care. I was wrong. That phone call stripped away the last illusion. They didn't just abandon me. They confirmed I'd never mattered. So I let them think I'd vanished. I didn't post online, didn't call, didn't beg. If they wanted to believe I'd failed, let them. I was building something they'd never see coming. The diner was my lifeline, but it was also my crucible. The late shifts left me exhausted, my hands raw from scrubbing plates, but the $200 a week kept me fed. Maya didn't charge me rent, but I slipped her what I could, determined not to be a burden. By 2 a.m., when the world was still, I'd sit at her kitchen table, laptop glowing, learning design. I started with the basics: color theory, typography, layout. I found free courses on Coursera, devoured blog posts, and joined online forums where designers shared tips. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I set a goal: land my first client within 6 months. I had no degree, no connections, just a hunger to prove I wasn't the failure my family thought. I built a portfolio of fake projects, logos for imaginary cafes, websites for non-existent startups. I posted them on freelance platforms, offering dirt-cheap rates. My first gig came 3 months in, $50 to design a flyer for a local yoga studio. It took me 10 hours, but when the payment hit my PayPal, I stared at the screen, tears in my eyes. Not because of the money, but because I'd earned it. No one's permission, no one's pity, just me. The gigs grew slowly. A bakery logo for $75, a business card for $30. Each one felt like a brick in a foundation no one else could see. I moved off Maya's couch into a shared room with 2 strangers, a cramped space with thin walls and a leaky faucet. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I painted the walls a soft blue, bought a thrift store desk, and set up my laptop like it was a command center. Every night, I worked until dawn, designing, learning, pitching. I didn't need applause. I needed progress. My family didn't know. I'd blocked their numbers, muted their social media. I checked their profiles sometimes, not out of longing, but curiosity. Nathan was still their pride. Photos of him at tech conferences, captions calling him our visionary. They'd paid for his coding boot camp, his apartment, his dreams. Me? I was the ghost they'd forgotten. But ghosts have power. They move unseen, and I was moving fast. By the end of the first year, I had a steady trickle of clients, small businesses mostly, needing websites or branding. I taught myself HTML and CSS to build simple sites, nothing fancy but clean and functional. Word spread in freelance circles. Lila's reliable. She's fast. She listens. I raised my rates, landed a $500 project for a local coffee shop's website. When I moved into my own studio apartment, I lit a candle and whispered, "This is yours. Don't let anyone take it." The panic attacks didn't stop, but they got quieter. I found a therapist who worked on a sliding scale, meeting me at 7 a.m. before my diner shifts. She helped me name the weight I'd carried: rejection, shame, the belief I wasn't enough. "You're building a life they can't touch," she said. And she was right. I wasn't just surviving. I was becoming someone new, someone who didn't need their validation. I started hiring freelancers to help with overflow work. 2 designers from the same forums where I'd begged for gigs. We called ourselves Spark Vibe Studio, a name I picked because it felt like the energy I'd found in the dark. We worked out of my apartment, laptops crowded on my tiny desk. I didn't post about it online, didn't announce milestones. My family thought I was gone, and I let them. Their world was Nathan's. Mine was mine. But I couldn't escape them entirely. One night, scrolling through a local tech blog, I saw Nathan's face. He'd started a company, some AI-driven app, and was pitching it to investors. The article called him a rising star. I felt a pang, not jealousy, but memory. I'd helped him write his first pitch deck, back when he was 20 and clueless. Now he was their hero, while I was the daughter they'd erased. I closed the tab and got back to work. Their story wasn't mine anymore. 2 years in, Spark Vibe was more than a side hustle. I'd quit the diner, focusing full-time on design. We had 10 regular clients, from restaurants to nonprofits, and I'd saved enough to buy a better laptop and a real desk. My panic attacks were manageable, thanks to therapy and routine. I was proud, not loud about it, but proud. I'd built this from nothing. No degree, no family, just grit. Then the news broke. I was on a call with a client, tweaking a website. Mock-up, when Maya texted me a link. "Is this Nathan?" she asked. It was a headline from a local news site. Tech entrepreneur arrested for fraud, embezzlement. My heart stopped. I clicked the link, and there was Nathan Chen, my brother, in a grainy mugshot, his smile smug even in handcuffs. He'd allegedly scammed $2 million from investors, funneling it through fake companies, promising AI solutions that didn't exist. The article listed startups he'd defrauded, clients who'd trusted him, lives he'd upended. I wasn't shocked by his recklessness. Nathan had always been careless, charming his way out of trouble. I was stunned because the world was finally seeing what I'd known. He wasn't a golden child. He was a mirage. By evening, the story was everywhere. Reddit threads, tech blogs, even a local TV segment. Startups he'd worked with cut ties. Investors demanded audits. His name, once their pride, was now a scandal. Then my phone lit up. Mom, Dad, Grandma, numbers I hadn't seen in years. Texts, voicemails, all variations of the same plea. "Lila, we need to talk. Nathan's in trouble." Mom's message was the longest. "We're family. Please help us." I stared at the words, remembering her voice 2 years ago. "You're on your own." Now, their perfect son was facing felony charges, and I, the failure, was their lifeline. I didn't respond. The next day, Dad emailed, "We know we weren't there for you, but Nathan needs you now. His bail is $300,000, and we can't cover it. You're doing well, Lila. Please." It wasn't an apology. It was a transaction. They didn't want me. They wanted my success, my clean name, my money. I deleted the email, not out of anger, but clarity. They'd bet on Nathan and lost. I wasn't their backup plan. The calls kept coming. Nathan left a voicemail, his voice shaky. "Lila, I screwed up. I need a cosigner, a witness, something. Please call me." I listened to it twice, hearing the boy I'd once protected, the brother I'd loved. But I also heard Mom's laugh, Dad's dismissal, Grandma's, "She should have been more like Nathan." I didn't call back. I wasn't ready, not yet. The media frenzy grew. Tech forums posted screenshots of Nathan's pitches, emails where he'd lied to clients. My name started appearing too. Lila Chen, a rising graphic designer, has no known involvement. That line stung them, I knew. For once, I was the one untarnished, the one they couldn't touch. A client mentioned the scandal during a call, saying, "You're lucky you're not tied to that mess." I smiled and said, "Yeah, lucky." But it wasn't luck. It was work. Years of nights at Maya's table, building something they'd never understand. I kept working, kept growing Spark Vibe. We landed a contract with a local museum, designing their new website for $10,000. It was our biggest yet, and I celebrated with my team over cheap pizza. No family, no fanfare, just us. Then came an unexpected call. A podcast, Women in Creative, Tech, wanted to interview me. We heard about your work, the host said. And, well, your brother's in the news. Want to share your story? I hesitated, then said yes. I didn't talk about Nathan. I talked about building Spark Vibe, about surviving, about finding worth when no one else saw it. At the end, I said, when they tell you you're nothing, believe them. Just long enough to build something they can't ignore. The episode went viral. Clips spread on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram with captions like, "She rose from the ashes." Strangers messaged me, sharing their own stories of being cast out, overlooked. I realized this wasn't just my story. It was theirs. 2. I started a blog, Unseen Sparks, posting about resilience, design, and starting over. The comments flooded in. Daughters, sisters, people who'd been erased, now finding their voice. My family saw it too. Their messages changed, more desperate. "Lila, we're sorry, we were wrong," but they always ended with the same ask. "Help Nathan." I didn't reply. Silence was my answer, and it was louder than their apologies. The confrontation came on a crisp fall morning. I was in my studio, now an office with 3 desks, a coffee maker, and a whiteboard covered in project notes, when my receptionist buzzed. "Lila, there's a family here. They say they're yours." My stomach twisted. I hadn't seen them in 3 years, not since the phone call that broke me. I took a breath, looked out at the Oakland skyline and said, "I'll come, down." They were in the lobby, looking out of place in my world. Mom wore a pressed blouse, Dad a stiff jacket, Grandma clutching her purse like it was a shield. Nathan wasn't there. He was still in jail, awaiting trial. They turned when I walked in, and for a moment, no one spoke. Mom's eyes widened, like she didn't recognize the woman I'd become. Tailored blazer, confident stride. Dad's jaw tightened. Grandma just stared. "You wanted to see me," I said, voice steady. "Say it." Mom stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Lila, we made a mistake. We didn't know how bad it was for you. We're sorry." Her words were rehearsed, but her eyes darted to Dad, like she needed his approval. I waited. Dad cleared his throat. "We should have been there. We were wrong." Grandma nodded, her voice soft for the first time in my memory. "You didn't deserve that." I let the silence sit, heavy. Then I said, "Do you remember what you told me when I called you from the hospital? When I was losing everything?" They froze. I didn't wait for an answer. "Mom, you laughed and said I'd made my choices. Dad, you called me a charity case. Grandma, you said I was a mess, that I should have been more like Nathan." I paused, letting the words land. "You didn't just cut me off. You cut me out." Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad looked at the floor. Grandma's hands shook. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Printouts of their texts, voicemails, the email I'd sent begging for help. "This is what you gave me," I said, handing it to Mom. "You wanted a mirror? Here it is." Mom opened the folder, her hands trembling. Dad glanced at it, then away. Grandma didn't touch it. "Lila," Mom whispered, "we're family. Nathan's facing 12 years. If you could just sign a letter, talk to the judge, your success, your name, it could help him." And there it was, the ask. Not love, not reconciliation, just another transaction. I stepped closer. "You told me I was on my own. You said I was a disgrace, not worth $1. Now you want me to save the son you chose over me." I met their eyes, one by one. You were right. I was on my own. And so is he. The silence was deafening. Mom's face crumpled. Dad's shoulders sagged. Grandma closed her eyes. I turned and walked away, past their apologies, past the years I'd spent hoping for their love. I didn't feel triumph, just peace. I'd built a life they couldn't touch, and they knew it. Back in my office, I opened my laptop and kept working. The folder wasn't for them. It was for me, a reminder of what I'd survived. That night, I posted on Unseen Sparks. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who sees you when you're invisible. The comments poured in, stories from people who'd been cast out, now rebuilding. I wasn't alone anymore. The morning after the lobby confrontation, I woke to a flood of notifications. The podcast clip from Women in Creative Tech had exploded online, shared across platforms with captions like, "She built an empire from nothing," and "This is what resilience looks like." My words, when they tell you you're nothing, believe them just long enough to build something they can't ignore, had struck a chord. Messages poured in from strangers, mostly women, sharing stories of being overlooked, dismissed, or abandoned by their families. A single mom in Chicago wrote, "I was told I'd never amount to anything. Your story gave me hope." A college student in Atlanta said, "I'm the black sheep too. Thank you for showing me I can keep going." I read everyone, my chest tight with something new. Purpose. I hadn't planned to become a voice for anyone but myself. Spark Vibe Studio was my focus, growing the business, mentoring my 2 freelancers, landing bigger clients. But the podcast had shifted something. My blog, Unseen Sparks, wasn't just a side project anymore. It was a lifeline for people like me, people who'd been erased but refused to stay invisible. I started posting more, tutorials on graphic design, advice on freelancing, but also raw, honest essays about surviving rejection. One post, titled "The Cost of Being Unseen," went viral, racking up thousands of shares. I wrote about the hospital night, the phone call, the way my family's dismissal had forced me to rebuild. "They didn't break me," I wrote. "They freed me to become someone they'll never know." The response was overwhelming. My inbox filled with messages from women who'd been cut off, siblings overshadowed by golden siblings, daughters, told they weren't enough. I realized this wasn't just my story. It was a movement. I spent nights moderating comments, responding to emails, connecting people with resources. Maya, who'd watched me rebuild from her couch, said, "Lila, you're not just designing websites anymore. You're designing hope." She was right. I'd stumbled into something bigger than myself. I decided to formalize it. I launched Unseen Sparks as a community platform, a digital space for those who'd been pushed out to connect, heal, and grow. I partnered with my therapist to offer mental health grants, pooling donations from clients and my own savings. I recruited freelancers from my network to mentor new designers, teaching them how to land gigs without degrees or connections. We even set up a small emergency fund for women facing eviction, because I knew what it felt like to stare at that notice on your door. Within 2 months, Unseen Sparks had 15,000 members, a mix of coders, artists, writers, and survivors, all sharing stories, skills, and strength. My family saw it too. Their messages didn't stop, but they changed tone. Mom's emails grew longer, almost frantic. "Lila, we've read your blog. We had no idea how much we hurt you. Please, let's talk." Dad sent a short note. "You've done well. We're proud. Can we meet?" Grandma called, leaving a voicemail. "I was wrong, Lila. I see that now." But every message ended the same way. "Nathan needs you." His trial was approaching, and the $300,000 bail was a wall they couldn't climb. They thought my success, my clean name, my growing platform, could save him. They didn't want me. They wanted my shine. I didn't respond, but their persistence stirred something. I started writing a memoir, late at night when the office was quiet. I called it From Ashes to Unstoppable, pouring out the story of that hospital night, the diner shifts, the first $50 gig. I wrote about Nathan, not with anger but clarity, about how his pedestal had cast a shadow over me. I wrote about unseen sparks, about the women who'd become my family when my own had walked away. A literary agent found my blog and reached out saying, "This needs to be a book." I signed a deal, my advance enough to fund more grants for Unseen Sparks. Meanwhile, Nathan's scandal grew. News outlets dug deeper, uncovering more victims, small startups, solo entrepreneurs who'd trusted him with their dreams. His face was everywhere, a cautionary tale of tech hubris. My name kept popping up too, always with the same caveat. Lila Chen, a successful designer, is uninvolved. It was a strange feeling, being defined against him, but it also felt right. I'd built something untarnished, something they couldn't claim. Then came the TEDx invitation. They didn't want me to talk about design. They wanted me to talk about resilience. The title they gave me was The Family I Chose. I spent weeks preparing, crafting a speech that wasn't just about me, but about every person who'd been told they weren't enough. On the day of the talk, I stood on stage in a deep green blazer, my hair loose, my voice steady. "Family isn't always who you're born to," I said. "Sometimes it's the people you find when you're forced to stand alone. And sometimes it's the person you become when no one else believes in you." I told my story, the hospital, the diner, the first client, the folder I'd handed my family. I talked about unseen sparks, about the women who'd taught me that strength isn't loud, it's quiet, persistent, unbreakable. The applause was overwhelming, echoing through the auditorium. Afterward, a young woman, maybe 19, approached me, tears in her eyes. "My dad said I'd never make it," she whispered. "You showed me I can." I hugged her, feeling the weight of her words. This was why I kept going. The TEDx talk went viral, shared by influencers, activists, even a few celebrities. Unseen Sparks grew to 25,000 members, and donations poured in, enough to hire a small staff to manage the platform. I started speaking at conferences, not about tech, but about survival, about building a life when the ground beneath you collapses. My family's messages kept coming, but I held my silence. They'd taught me that love was conditional. I'd learned to build something unconditional. One evening, as I reviewed a new grant application for Unseen Sparks, Maya called. "Lila, you need to see this." She sent me a link to a local news article. "Nathan Chen pleads guilty, faces 10-year. Sentence. He'd taken a plea deal, admitting to fraud and embezzlement." The article mentioned me again. Lila Chen, his sister, has emerged as a beacon of resilience, leading a community for overlooked women. I closed my laptop, feeling not triumph, but closure. Nathan's fall wasn't my victory. It was just the end of a story I'd stopped writing years ago. The final reckoning came at an Unseen Sparks event, a fundraiser we'd organized in a downtown Oakland community center. The room was alive with energy. Women sharing success stories, mentors pairing with new freelancers, laptops donated to girls starting their careers. I just finished a speech about turning pain into power when I saw them across the room. Mom, Dad, and Grandma, standing awkwardly by the exit. They hadn't called ahead, hadn't emailed. They'd just shown up, older, quieter, their faces lined with something new, regret. I didn't approach them. I let them wait, watching as I laughed with my team, hugged a young designer who'd landed her first gig, handed out certificates to our newest mentees. They stood there, out of place in a world I'd built without them. When the crowd thinned, they approached, slow and cautious, like they knew they were trespassing. Dad spoke first. "Lila, we saw your TEDx talk. We've read about Unseen Sparks. You've done incredible things." His voice was soft, almost broken. Mom nodded, her eyes wet. "We're so proud of you. We were wrong, so wrong." Grandma stepped forward, her hands clasped. I said awful things. I didn't see you. I'm sorry. I let their words hang, studying their faces. They looked smaller, not just older, humbled maybe, but still carrying the weight of their choices. Then Mom said it. Nathan's sentencing is next week. They say a character letter from you, with your name, your success, could reduce his time. Please, Lila. He's still your brother. There it was, the same ask, dressed in apologies, but still a transaction. I took a breath, my voice calm but firm. You came here to say you're proud, but you're still asking me to save the son you chose over me. You told me I was a disgrace, a burden, not worth helping. When I was in the hospital, begging for 1 month's rent, you laughed. Mom, you called me a charity case, Dad. You said I should have been more like Nathan, Grandma, and now you're here. Not for me, but for him. They didn't speak. Mom's lips trembled. Dad's eyes dropped. Grandma's hands tightened around her purse. I continued. You didn't see a daughter when I needed you. You saw an inconvenience. And now you want my name, my work, to fix your mistake. I paused, meeting their eyes. You told me I was on my own. You were right. And so is Nathan. The silence was heavy, final. Mom started to speak, but I raised a hand. I've built a family here, I said, gesturing to the room. These women, these stories, they're my home. You don't get to walk in and claim it because you're desperate. I turned, walking, back to my team, leaving them in the quiet they'd created. That night, I finished the last chapter of From Ashes to Unstoppable. The dedication read, To every unseen daughter, sister, survivor, may your voice drown out the silence they gave. You. The book was published 6 months later, hitting bestseller lists within weeks. Readers called it raw, real, a roadmap for anyone who'd been discarded. Unseen Sparks grew to 50,000 members, with chapters in 5 cities. We launched a scholarship, fund, a legal aid program for women fighting for their rights, and a mentorship network that reached thousands. Nathan's sentencing came and went. He got 8 years, lighter than expected, but I didn't write the letter. His lawyer reached out one last time, saying my name could have swayed the judge. I replied with a single line. My brother's choices are not my responsibility. I meant, Tati. They'd taught me family was conditional. I'd built one that wasn't. A year later, I stood on another stage, this time at a national conference for women entrepreneurs. I wore a red dress, a quiet rebellion against the good girl, rules I'd grown up with. I told the crowd, the people who bury you will come back when they need your light. You don't owe them a spark, you owe yourself a fire. The applause was deafening, but the real victory was the emails that followed, from women starting businesses, leaving toxic families, reclaiming their worth. My family stopped reaching out. I heard through Maya that they'd moved to a smaller house, their savings drained by Nathan's legal fees. I didn't feel joy or sorrow, just distance. I'd built a life they couldn't touch, a community they couldn't claim. Unseen Sparks became my legacy, not just for me, but for every woman who'd been told she wasn't enough. Looking back, that hospital night wasn't the end. It was the beginning. When they cut me off, they thought I'd break. Instead, I became unstoppable. My name is Lila Chen, and this is the story of how I turned their rejection into a revolution. If you've ever been unseen, know this. Your spark is enough. Let it burn. If Lila's story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible or know someone who has, share this video. Like it, comment your own story. How did you rise when the world counted you out? Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories of resilience and triumph. Join the Unseen Sparks community. And let's keep lifting up the voices no one else hears. Together we're unstoppable.